Now, apart from these distortions, there is another fourth distortion, which is nothing but the political culture existing in India right now is not enough matured, according to many political scientists. Now, what do we mean by political culture and its maturity? Political culture is nothing but the political process, okay, the practices by political parties as well as politicians to conduct politics. As Jayaprakash Narayan has mentioned, the answer to bad politics is not no politics but good politics. Now, what does this statement augur for us? It means that in a democracy, politics is the lifeblood. So, politics is nothing but resolving of conflicts in a peaceful manner. Conflict resolution in a peaceful manner is what is defined as politics in a simplistic way. So, how do you resolve these conflicts is by politics, but how do you conduct politics? Is it by political infighting? Is it by bickering? Or is it by mature long-term interests of the nation? Now, these questions are very valid in the context of a third world country like India, where the political maturity is at a very nascent phase. Now, look at this issue. We have enough examples where the politicians or the political parties in the country have not displayed enough maturity to solve the problems. Take the case of land border resolution with Bangladesh. It is certainly in the national interest to resolve the long-standing border dispute with Bangladesh ever since Bangladesh was separated. The ruling UPA government has conducted an agreement with Bangladesh government. Now, there is much which depends to what extent this land boundary issue will be resolved by the parliament. The future relations between Bangladesh and India to a certain extent depend on that. And also, it is the safety and security of the people who are on the either side of the border is also at stake. Now, if there is a political party in the opposition who opposes for the sake of opposition, for gaining some political brownie points, that is certainly not in matured political culture. Now, this lack of matured political culture, which is ridden by caste, by religion, by gender, which means ascripted to identities, it is taken to local level, which is nothing but party factions. So, if the people of the local community, which are until then cohesive, were divided based on party lines for reasons of competitive elections, that is certainly not a good statement. Rajni Kothari, the well-known political scientist in India, has argued that unless the political culture matures in India, you do not have a good politics in India. So if you take this lack of matured political culture to the local level, it will be certainly against the wishes of anyone who is interested in local self-government. This is another distortion which has arisen primarily because of the incomplete reforms in Panchayat Raj institutions, which talk about enlightened citizenship, responsibility and accountability. So these are the guiding principles. If these are the guiding principles of how a local self-government should function, then there is no place in it for narrow political infighting and bickering. Unless this situation emerges, local self-government will not be, to use the words of Prime Minister, will not be a harbinger or a new hope for rural prosperity. Now, apart from these distortions, we have talked about how the Panchayat Raj institutions have politically empowered many of the marginalized sections of the society, have brought them into visibility, have in a sense made democracy for the first time participatory. In 4 decades, for the first time, democracy has become participatory rather than just representative. So, a balanced argument about 2 decades of Panchayat Raj should focus on 2 things. The first thing is that democratic participation and autonomy in decision making. Democratic participation has increased, but democratic participation in decision making is still an exception rather than a norm. It indicates that there is a huge gap between what is the spirit of the constitution and the practice of the letter. So this gap has to be bridged. That is what is in the interest of anyone who is interested in rural prosperity. Now there is a second thing. Due to this, the people do not think that the people do not think that decentralization will solve their problems. Because of the half-baked reforms and the distortions we have seen, the people do not actually think that, decentralization will solve their problems, or at least some of their problems. Now, since the people do not think in that way, they do not actually fight for a right to self-governance. They keep fighting for right to food, right to employment, or many other motley group of rights we have initiated since right to information in 2005. We need to understand that this rights-based movement has its own limitation. Now that's a structural limitation, we cannot solve it. Right to Education Act passed in 2010, it actually mandates that by 2012, certain things should be done. It's already 2 years and things have not been done. The Supreme Court has asked the central and the states not less than 6 times to implement the act. But what happened? So does the state have enough capacity to deliver? So just a clarion call for rights-based movement does not solve the problem. Ultimately, we need right to self-government. If we need right to self-government, which of course is both a means and an end, will result in right to development and prosperity. People need to understand that right to self-government will actually do things in practice. Now, because of this half-baked reforms, people do not believe that right to self-government will actually solve some of their ills. That is why. Since people do not think that way, the political parties do not think that they have an electoral advantage by using that in their campaign. So, in other words, it means that no political party in India thinks that they are going to win an election by promising Panchayat Raj institution. Now we have a vicious cycle, and